Um, Hello, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Book Cafe. Thanks for joining us. Today we are hosting Adriana Marais, who will be launching a book after a brief talk. In order to save time, I won't go through Adriana's bio. This you can already find online. And maybe in the course of registering for this program, you'd have seen a brief about her. So I'll allow her to speak a bit more about herself and the things that she has been involved in beyond what we see on the internet. But for now, I'll just say big congratulations to Adriana and the colleagues at the Foundation for Space Development Africa for the selection of the Africa to Moon mission for launch on the far side of the moon. So a few years ago, I was opportune to be at the African Union, and one of my concerns then was that they were interested or knowledgeable about space before we can move forward with the African Space Program. So along with my colleagues who were with me then, Misha Kenduritu and Michael Afu, we started an in-house coincidentally, that same week, a private company that was based in the UK called Lunar Mission 1, I don't know whether Adriana remembers this, they also announced a similar mission about going to the moon. And we're trying to follow both stories. Lunar Mission 1 exceeded its fundraising target. I think both missions were supposed to raise funds from maybe Kickstarter or something, whatever, something, a crowdfunding mechanism. But Africa to Moon mission did not succeed at that time. So one would have thought that maybe Lunar Mission 1 succeeded and Africa to Moon mission did not succeed. But that appears not to be very accurate because eventually Lunar Mission 1 was shut down a few years later. About 2 years ago, actually on 20th July 2023, as part of the International Moon Day, I conducted an interview with Carla Sharp, who happens to be the initiator and a colleague of Adriana, about the Africa to Moon mission. And I remember asking her about the mission. She informed me then that it was not, the project was still alive and that it was kind of coming back in a new way. So I was really excited when I heard the news last week that the mission had been selected as one of the payloads by China for a mission to the moon. I think that's coming up in 2028, if I'm not mistaken. Coincidentally, last week I was in Cairo for the inauguration of the African selection of the Africa to Moon mission was kind of really timely for Africa. And I think it's an indicator of good things to come. So today, I guess we'll speak a bit, and the other will tell us a bit Moon mission, apart from other things she's working on, like Proudly Human, and maybe a bit about some other things she has been involved in before. But more importantly for today is that I want to interact with Adriana about her book, which was just released I think about 2 weeks ago. Yes, about 2 weeks ago. Out of this world and into the next. And I have my copy here. I was one of those that did a pre-ordering of the book. I like the subtitle actually, which says Notes from a Physicist on Space Exploration. So I think in the course of our interaction today, Adriana will share some of those notes. But I also encourage that we buy the book because I actually find it a very interesting book. I've read it. And one of the things I notice as I read is how Adriana straddles seamlessly from physics to chemistry to biology on one hand, and then on the other hand, she's exploring life as in living things and the universe, which, maybe you may say it's non-living, but somehow, through different processes, living things evolve from the universe. So it's quite an interesting read. And the closest I've read that has in this kind of field that has been so simplified is Stephen Hawking's book, A Brief History of Time. So my conclusion from reading this book is that what Stephen Hawking did with theoretical physics in A Brief History of Time, Adriana has done with cosmology in this book. Well, I'm not, I mean, in terms of definitions, cosmology may not be the right word. Maybe Adriana will also help me with understanding that. But Adriana, I just want to say a big congratulations to you for this book. I know it's not easy to write a book, talk less of a topic like this. Something I try to mix up astrophysics, biology, and I just bring everything together and call it astrophysical biology. But that's also something you may want to speak about. Um, so thanks everyone for joining, and I hope that this time will be a very fruitful and inspiring time for you. Without much further ado, I'll invite Adriana to give her brief talk, and then after that, we can interact with her. Thank you, Adriana.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Tim, for inviting me and organizing this session. And thanks to the African Space Leadership Institute for celebrating books and reading and facilitating us getting together in this way. So, yeah, I thought I would leave it informal today to give us a chance to interact. So thank you for the mention of Africa to Moon. I will get to that in a moment. Perhaps let me start with the book. So I will read a little piece of the book to you as maybe a teaser in a bit. I've shared the link to the UK Amazon, but if you have a Amazon closer to you, I'm sure you will find it. But maybe more interestingly or easily is the Audible. So for some reason it's India is Audible, but it's generally available on Audible. And after much convincing, the publisher agreed to let me read it. So you'll hear a lot from me in that book further beyond this talk, if you're so interested. So the history of the book, well, actually I began writing the book back in 2016 in Guadalajara in Mexico. So that year, the International Astronautical Congress was in Guadalajara. And that was a very exciting IAC, because Elon Musk got on stage and announced to thousands of space fanatics that SpaceX would be building transport to Mars in order to make humans multiplanetary. So this was the first official announcement of that goal. And we've seen a lot of interesting develops from Elon lately, which I won't go into today. But at that point, yeah, the thousands of people in the audience were, more than over the moon to hear this announcement. And personally, it made a huge impact on me. I remember going back to my hotel room after that and actually just lying down for an hour because I was overwhelmed by the idea that I happened to be on this planet at the point where not only someone with perhaps the technical capabilities and perhaps the team was announcing such a plan, but also one of the richest people on the planet. And this combination is a rare moment in time. And as I say, regardless of what's going on now, I think the team that Elon has put together at SpaceX is, of course, world-class, leading the space industry in many ways. And perhaps regardless of what's going on politically, we will see a Mars mission in our lifetime, perhaps on the Starship rocket. So that the final testing of Starship obviously remains to be seen. But an exciting, super exciting time to be alive. So after that conference, I went to, I was a student at the time and had like a week, found myself a cheap place to stay in Mexico and just started writing the book. So basically it got published now almost a decade later. I wasn't writing full time, of course, life is busy, but it really has been a decade-long process to get this book out. And I must say, personally, the reason I wrote the book is not to sell it, not for sales. I needed to get that information out of my brain and onto the page. I don't know, I just felt like I had to do that. So I'm really glad that it's done. And so in some ways, I hope that I can do more discussion type engagements with people where I get to chat to them. where the unidirectional speaking that I had done a lot of in the past can now be replaced to some extent by the book. So I love listening to audiobooks personally, especially when driving. So maybe you'll enjoy it. Maybe it's great to fall asleep too, because it does go into some technical detail at times. But yeah, the book's out there, so I'm really glad about that. And to look at the book, so my research background began in quantum physics. I mean, actually, as a child, if I look through my old school books, I wrote down astronaut, astronaut, astronaut as my future career for many years. And in South Africa at the time, and still, there is no astronaut program. So as a runner-up prize, I decided to just study physics because there was no aeronautical engineering or something like that. So I studied physics, became fascinated with quantum physics. And then during my postdoc, actually, after studying quantum biology, which I do refer to in the book, I began to become interested in looking for the building blocks of life in space. If we are trying to understand who we are, we can to some extent look at the history of our species on this planet. But to understand, who we are and where we come from, I think we have to look beyond the planet. And so my research into the molecular inner workings of the simplest organisms that we know of, like bacteria, led me to think what came before that. And when we look to interstellar clouds or to space in general, we do see the building blocks of life. And so from my journey in quantum physics, I came back to space, to understand life. Essentially here on Earth, we have a single data point, because genetically, with massive developments in genetics over the past few decades, we can prove that all life on Earth is related. So whether we're looking at bacteria, plants, animals, humans, we share significant portions of the informational molecular structures that we contain. And therefore, we're one terrestrial family of living systems. And so to understand what life is in general, Earth is not enough. We need to look beyond Earth to understand, is there another data point? Is there life distinct from Earth life out there? Or perhaps life related to Earth out there? And so at the conference in Mexico, I was presenting my work on looking for the building blocks of life in space from a quantum biologist's perspective. Soon after that, though, and let me take this trail of a story to Africa to Moon. Soon after that, I was back in Cape Town and sitting at an event at the Cape Town Science Center. And I overheard the woman in front of me talking to the person next to her, saying that she worked for the SKA. And I immediately, eavesdropped and butted into their conversation and introduced myself. And that person was Carla Sharp, actually now soon to be Dr. Carla Sharp Mitchell. And so we met at this astronaut event with the head of research at NASA at the time, Dr. Ellen Stofan. Great event. But Carla and I forged a decade-long friendship. We've celebrated our 10-year friendship anniversary this year. So meeting her at that event was a significant meeting and collaboration, because she invited me as Itima. Sorry, I lost you for a while during the introduction, but I heard most of it. So you explained the history a bit of the Africa to Moon project and the foundation that Carla founded. Actually, 1 year before the South African National Space Agency was established, Carla established the Foundation for Space Development Africa. So maybe it's natural that we get the first mission to the moon before the South African Space Agency, because in 2009, Carla established the Foundation for Space Development Africa. She's an economist by training, but her heart is in space and her eyes are to the stars. So we became friends, and the Africa to Moon concept was, Carla came up with this concept, a decade ago, let's say approximately. And it took a lot to get to the point where in 2023, late one night, she received an email saying China has offered up space on an upcoming mission to the moon. They're welcoming payload applications from international projects and organizations, whatever the government organizations they may be. So we rustled together a proposal, and it's been a long 18-month journey with our associated Chinese team. And finally, last week, our Africa to Moon radio telescope was announced at the Chinese National Space Day, which is actually the 10th anniversary of China's Space Day. So there are a lot of 10th anniversaries happening here. And I think these truly big projects take a decade at least. The book is not so big, but I think Africa's first mission to the moon, which at the moment it looks to be, we're super excited about the establishment of the African Space Agency. But as far as we know, there are no plans that are really coming to fruition for Africa to send a mission to the moon. So at the moment, I stand corrected if anyone has any other information, but we are Africa's first mission to the moon. Of course, different companies or organizations in Africa may have contributed components to different deep space missions, even further than the moon, but this is the first entire project designed, built, and implemented by Africans to go as far as the moon, in other words, below Earth orbit, where a lot of our activity has been to date. So it was announced, a super exciting time. We were in Shanghai last week. Carla flew out, and we received the announcement that Africa to Moon will indeed be going. The launch date may be pushed to 2029. I think still publicly it's 2028, but Chang'e 7 will depart to the moon next year, and Chang'e 8 will depart to the lunar South Pole as the subsequent mission. So that's the final mission that's part of the Chang'e program. And Chang'e, for those who don't know, is the lunar goddess in China who lives on the moon. So that will be the final Chang'e mission, Chang'e 8. And after that, each mission will be designated as the International Lunar Research Station mission. So just to give some dates, although the space fanatics amongst you are surely up to date, but let me summarize. So, and these dates change, so I stand corrected, but the current US date for putting people back on the moon, as I understand, is next year, which I think everyone can understand remains to be seen, right? They still need to do the crewed orbital mission before obviously landing people on the surface. Even the launch vehicle seems uncertain at this point from a perspective where I'm sitting anyway. Who knows what the inner conversations are, but let's see. The US was hoping to put people back on the moon any moment now in the next few years. China, on the other hand, is more conservative with their dates, and they have stuck to before 2030 as their official announced dates. Now, when we look at lunar exploration, again, I'm deviating from the book, but giving you some more recent updates since I'm sitting here in China. The Chang'e missions have been success after success. For the past decade and more, China has taken the lead in successfully landing on the surface of the moon. For example, landing for the first time ever on the far side of the moon. So that Chang'e mission remains the only human mission to have landed on the far side. In fact, they even grew a cotton plant there. So this is one small leaf that germinated out of the seed that was placed in a highly specialized mini greenhouse on the far side of the moon was the furthest that a plant or any terrestrial life really, except for the orbital humans who were going around the moon while the Apollo crew were on the surface. So let's say the furthest plant that has ever grown from the surface of Earth, where obviously terrestrial life comes from. So that's just one achievement. On that same mission was in fact a radio telescope. So this was the first deployed radio telescope on the surface of the moon. It did not manage to send back science data because of interference with the lander, which rendered the data unusable. The interference with the lander was just too strong. So at this point, the various triggers for Carla's creation of the Africa to Moon project, but the engineers who have successfully built Meerkat, the precursor to the SKA in South Africa, are some of the world's best radio astronomy engineers currently, and understanding radio frequency interference has been a primary objective of the team in South Africa for the past few years in creating the South African portion of the SKA, the precursor 64-dish Meerkat array. So in the Western Cape currently, we are sitting physically with some of the world's leading radio antenna engineers. So China's radio telescope on the far side did not science data back to Earth. Then let's move to the US. So the last time the US landed a fully successful mission on the surface of the moon was, hold your breaths, 1972. Okay, in 2024, Intuitive Machines, a private company in collaboration with NASA, landed soft landing, yes, on the surface of the moon, but unfortunately the lander had one leg tip underneath itself and it fell over and couldn't charge its panels. And so the radio astronomy instrument on board the Intuitive Machines lander was at best partially successful. So they've recently put out a publication where they ingeniously managed to scramble through some small bit of data that they received on Earth and make a publication. But basically, there has not yet been a fully successful radio astronomy instrument deployed on the surface of the moon. So the Africa to Moon project really aims to not only demonstrate a novel instrument, so ours is not a monopole or a dipole antenna, as has previously been deployed. Carla, as an economist, came up with a completely out-of-the-box idea to use small loop antennas, and not only one, but 3 orthogonal small loop antennas to create a ball. This ball can roll into any orientation and still have one of the loops being in the orientation that can observe whatever science target may be in mind at that point. So this is very different to deploying a dipole, which may need to be extended, or even rover solutions are often suggested as ways to deploy really long radio astronomy antennas. Should be big in size, right, in order to receive the long radio frequency waves that they need to do science. So Carla's approach, somehow inspired by the SKA square kilometer array radio telescope, is an array of balls. And so the further the balls are from each other, the bigger the effective instrument is. So we don't need to deploy a long wire, which on the moon is a tricky business, especially at the South Pole. Temperatures can plummet below -200 degrees Celsius. And so you can imagine the amounts of expansion and contraction that happens if you need to charge your solar panels and are in sunlight during the lunar day. During the lunar night, which is 14 days long, you can plummet to -200. So there's massive amounts of shifts. So these balls don't need to be deployed like lengthways. They can just be separated. They can roll away from each other and create an array that can have a resolution good enough to look at targets like the Earth, the closest target. So the sun, perhaps Jupiter, the galactic background, and the lunar surface itself. So these are all science targets that are little known in the low frequency electromagnetic spectrum, because in fact, from the surface of Earth, we cannot see below 10 megahertz. So the atmosphere and the ionosphere on Earth actually block all electromagnetic radiation below 10 megahertz. So this is the reason we want to put a radio telescope on the moon, is to look between 0 and 10 megahertz. And there could be new science lying in wait, which the first African designed and built, and perhaps the first radio telescope on the surface of the moon ever could discover. So not only do we want to demonstrate the new kind of instrument with this array of balls, we also want to do new science if everything goes to plan and we get data back, which we will share across Africa with our various institutional partners. But we also want to achieve world firsts. You know, I think it's time for Africa to expand our role in space exploration. Lunar exploration is happening right now, and the first step for Africa is to put technology on the moon. You know, we can hope and dream, and I hope young people are, to be part of the crew that eventually lives in these research bases. But a necessary first step to doing that is to put technology there and understand the challenges of the environment. So We want to, through the Africa to Moon project, inspire the next generation of African scientists, innovators, and dreamers that we can achieve world firsts. We can do these in space also, and also on Earth. It's not limited to science and technology, but we really want to inspire people to reach for the stars, let's say. So I think that's maybe more than enough for me. I've given you some science detail and a telescope. I'm not sure what your backgrounds are. So maybe we can open for some discussion. Feel free to ask extremely general questions. Like at some point I volunteered to go to Mars on a one-way trip. That project went bankrupt. But I'm still hoping step by step to maybe tick off the moon at some point and still go to Mars if I have enough time left. Otherwise, I will be also happy to be on Earth and see the next generation of young people exploring beyond Earth, which I think we are on track for in spite of all the challenges we see around us now. We cannot debate that this is a really exciting time for space exploration, particularly from the way I'm seeing it here in China. So yeah, should we open up for some questions? Happy to discuss. Maybe I'll skip the reading, in fact, because I read the whole book, so I guess you guys can drop into Audible and listen to the sample, and maybe we can have a discussion instead.
Yeah, thanks, Adriana. Well, you may still be able to do some reading maybe later, but like you said, maybe we start off with some discussions. Thanks for giving kind of a lot of detail about the Africa to Moon mission. But I want to start a few questions, maybe by first of all talking about you a bit. I know you've mentioned a few things, but I just wanted to speak a bit more about the Mars One mission. What really inspired you? Because it was supposed to be a one-way mission, which means that there's no guarantee of coming back to the Earth. So what really inspired you to kind of latch on into this mission? And I mean, the way it is now, you said if you still have opportunity, you still want to participate in that. So what drives you in all this?
I wouldn't even use the word drive. It was just a very, let's go back. So at age 4, I already imagined that I would explore other worlds. I didn't even think of planets. I just thought about other worlds that exist beyond this world Earth that we live on. And so when I saw the Mars One project, I was almost shocked that this weird childhood imagining that I had was coming to fruition in my lifetime. So let's look at the 4 billion years that life has been evolving on planet Earth. It's only right now, in this kind of terrifying but extremely exciting moment that we all live in. There's a lot of stuff going on this planet right now. But when I look at space exploration, it's an extremely critical moment for our species, and not only ours, but the agricultural, the plants we'll bring with us, the microbes we'll bring with us. This will be the first time in 4 billion years that a determined mission of terrestrial life will hop on perhaps the spaceship and travel to the next door neighbor planet. Traveling to the moon is not such a big deal. It's our moon. For me, that's like something we should have done some time back, establishing a permanent presence there. I mean, of course, we've been, but getting to the next planet is really the first step to exploring the solar system and then being able to leave the solar system. And so, my feeling was, if this is happening in my lifetime, there is absolutely no chance that I will not do everything to be part of this exciting moment. And I'd love to be one of the people doing the exploring, but of course, if I'm 90 years old by then like seeing it on whatever virtual reality internet we have by then will also be good. So this was a very natural, I didn't have to think about it. There was no thought process. This was like, wow, this is happening. It's happening. What I thought would happen is happening. So the one-way trip aspect, I mean, I think when we look back at our parents, grandparents, ancestors, most of us will know about stories of people who moved from one place to another. It would be very unusual to find a human who's living in the same place that all of their ancestors have lived in. There's 200,000 years of human migration we're talking about here, by foot, by horseback, by dugout canoe, by ship, whatever it may be. Humans emerged in Southern Africa, so I guess there may be some exceptions to this living in Southern Africa. But for me, for example, my ancestors traveled from France as religious refugees, the French Huguenots who came by ship to the southern tip of Africa. So perhaps it's in my DNA to make long trips into the unknown. And I mean, the travel by ship that my ancestors made was on the order of months. Getting to Mars is on the order of months. And whether your trip is one way because you can't afford the return trip, as the French Huguenots, they, scraped together the resources to get on the ship to come to South Africa. That was it. They were staying. Or whether it's because you enjoy it. And obviously we all know examples of people who've moved to a new place and not come back because they established a new life there. So there are various reasons for one-way trips, maybe financial, maybe enjoyment. And for Mars, for me, it would be both, I think. Yeah, I would be prepared to sacrifice what I would be leaving behind on Earth for that unique adventure that would be being part of the first community to set up camp there. And maybe on that note, I can say in the book, I do talk about science, but a challenging part of the book for me was thinking about community, thinking about society, thinking about economics, thinking about culture, because we cannot leave culture and ethics out of the discussion of space exploration. What fundamental principles do we want to represent our communities when we expand beyond Earth? And I think looking around many of the things happening on Earth at the moment, we might know what we would like to advance beyond, and what we would like to see as a more prominent part of the principles that define our new communities. Not new, but evolved, let's say, as we advance, as we move forward. And for me, I think collaboration has to be at the heart of the kind of communities that we create going forward. Competition can only get us so far. And curiosity, this conformism, this control can only get us so far. Curiosity and collaboration, I think, have and should define our exploration. And so in the book, I dive a bit into that as well, like what kind of economic system, for example, would a society characterized by curiosity and collaboration perhaps engage in? Okay, I'm talking too long now. Let's go back to questions.
And then somewhere in the book, you mentioned that your dad wrote a book which was inspired by your participation in the Mars One project. In the book, it says the title is Messages from the Deep. Would you like to tell us a bit about your dad and how he influenced your scientific curiosity?
Yeah, he's actually here in China, so I'll have to duck out of this call at some point. My parents came to Shanghai for the announcement. So my parents have always been great supporters. I'm blessed with parents who supported my decision to go to Mars on a one-way trip. They were as excited as I was. They said it seems like a very natural thing for me to do. They said they know me best and they couldn't imagine me turning this adventure down. So they've always supported me. They are not scientific in background, but whatever crazy ideas I've come up with, I've always had their support. So I'm so grateful for that. I think my mom once said to a journalist who asked, how can you let your daughter go to Mars on a one-way trip? And she said, what kind of parent doesn't support their child's dreams? So I'm really blessed to have parents with that kind of approach. And definitely I owe my fearless sense of adventure to their support of any crazy ideas I've had. Well, not all of them. Many crazy ideas I've had in my life.
Okay, the Mars One mission project did not work, but then you set up the Proudly Human project or initiative. Would you like to speak a bit about that?
Yes, so in 2019, the Mars One project declared bankruptcy. But in any case, they didn't have a transport system. So in my mind, this was like, I wouldn't say irrelevant, but the failure of a startup that didn't have a rocket or a billionaire, was not a big problem for the expansion of humanity beyond Earth, So it was an exciting project to be a part of. And if it had succeeded, I would have been on Mars already. In fact, the first crew was supposed to leave last year. So needless to say, that didn't happen. But even if Mars One did raise billions of dollars, we would still be here on Earth because guess what? There's no transport system. So we're back in the same position we were in, which is we need Starship or the Chinese to develop the transport system to get there. So we're still in the same position, really. Proudly Human, looked at what would happen next. So I'm not developing transport systems, but I was thinking about team spirit. In a nutshell, team spirit in extreme environments, and the strong parallels between communities living in extreme conditions on Earth. Let's think about informal settlements, refugee camps, war-torn places that don't have access to the necessary healthcare and clean water, basic space. I mean, many people on Earth are living in dire conditions. So for me, the parallels between, the extreme conditions that people live under here on Earth and the extreme conditions that people exploring beyond Earth will face boil down to a set of requirements, which are the same, which is shelter, power, water, food, and communication systems. Because if any of these 5 fail, then you cannot have reliable healthcare, reliable education, etc. So, whether we are thinking about resourcing people here on Earth on a large scale, or whether we're thinking about providing these same resources to people beyond Earth, we need to develop the efficient technologies to do this. And in fact, the sad thing is, perhaps for people on Earth, that these technologies already exist. And so the real challenge is, how do we get these technologies to the people on a large scale? And I believe, the parallel developments with space exploration and making these technologies perhaps more efficient, more affordable, more scalable can happen in parallel. So to give some examples, solar panels, providing power to people who perhaps don't have access to the grid. These were sophisticated by the space industry because you can't burn fossil fuel in space. So back in the 50s, when the first solar-powered satellite was launched, nobody was thinking about climate change. Nobody was thinking about, people without access to the electrical grid. They were thinking about powering satellites in space. And so luckily, we've got more than 50 years of development of solar power technology behind us because of the space industry. We can look to nuclear power, another great solution which Africa has there's a second nuclear power station being built in Africa at the moment, I believe, perhaps more than one. But currently, I believe Koeberg is the only functional nuclear power station in Africa. Okay, that's a maybe long discussion, but nuclear power also owes its development to a large extent to the space industry. That's power. What about water? Shockingly, sophisticated filtration systems were developed for the 6 astronauts living in the International Space Station. But these kind of systems that are lightweight, efficient, low power, etc., can of course be scaled to people on Earth who need access to recycled clean water also. Food production, so LED lights and the idea of growing food in confined, controlled indoor conditions was also stimulated to a large extent by people living in the ISS. Again, there are negative aspects to this, thinking that like the 6 people that have inhabited the space station have led to these ideas, but the great thing is that they did. And so thinking about growing food in urban centers, maybe in the basement or on the rooftop, depending on the climate, can also be linked to the challenges that people face living in Earth orbit. Communication systems, I need say no more. Satellites have provided financial services, global positioning systems, Earth observation, global communications, etc. That's obviously space technology. So we can see how power, water, food, and communications have been developed or driven to where we see them today, to a large extent by the space industry. So what will living on the moon lead to? I would say we cannot yet imagine the kind of developments that will happen when we have the challenge of just a few people living on the moon permanently doing research, not the same people, they will rotate, but a permanently inhabited research base on the moon will lead to massive developments in all sorts of fields, maybe some we've never heard of. Getting further than the Earth-Moon system, which is of course one system, to Mars, I think furthermore will revolutionize culture, politics, economics, because I think the moon is forever tied to Earth. Whatever challenges we face here in economics, politics, I believe will be mirrored in the moon. It's our moon. So the nationalism, etc., perhaps the collaboration, perhaps the conflict, I believe we're going to see the same story on the moon. But perhaps perhaps Mars is far enough to really think about reimagining our society in ways that we have not yet thought about. So yeah, Proudly Human looked at teams in extreme environments, looked at integrating technologies. So our technology partners are water filtration systems, product developers are like different power systems, product developers, all the different products we wanted to integrate, take to extreme environments, put people there, utilize them. So Proudly Human's a little bit on the back burner at the moment while we develop the lunar technology. But Proudly Human's ready to get off the ground at any moment. The technology partners are on standby. The volunteers are on standby. The locations are already established. So we've got partners in Namibia, we've got partners in Antarctica, partners under the ocean. So we're ready to go. If anyone knows of a funder that wants to kick that off, I'm welcome for suggestions. But yeah, at the moment I'm focusing on Africa to Moon. So Proudly Human, you can check out the website, is raring to go as soon as the next opportunity arises.
Thanks, Adriana. Just one more question before I invite colleagues to maybe ask questions or make comments. Somewhere in the book also, you mentioned that one time you're having an interaction, maybe with a journalist, and you're trying to do an introduction, and you wanted to say something like proudly human, but maybe the person heard partly human. I just wanted your thoughts on that. Are we partly human? Looking at the interaction, I mean, where we came from and the interaction with the universe, what's your perception about humanity?
I guess we need a beer or something to go down that rabbit hole. So let me keep it reasonable in the short time we have here. Yeah, I think my favorite theory of how life emerged on Earth would be that some primitive life form was delivered to Earth in a meteorite. So recently we've had fascinating experiments done where perhaps just bacteria or just fungi don't survive necessarily. But when you have a collaboration of those two, like a lichen or some symbiotic relationship of microorganisms, they become more robust. When you encase them in something like a clay or a rock or a meteorite, basically, and then send them through space, these microorganisms, especially communities of these microorganisms, don't necessarily die. And when you introduce them again after the radiation of space, after the vacuum, after the extreme cold and perhaps sunlit conditions of space, so they did these tests on the outside of the space station. You take these things back inside, you crack them open from the protective layer that they've been covered with, you put them in water, bang, life comes out. So that was a very simplified overview, but I believe life can travel through space in a protected environment. Let's not go into the spaceship theory, that's a whole nother can of worms. But certainly microbial life has been demonstrated to be able to survive the extreme conditions of space when encased in some kind of meteorite-like substance. So for me, I think there's a lot of mystery about how the very first organisms emerged on Earth. There seems to be a gap, you know, evolution, if it happens bit by bit, there seems to be a time that's missing because things happen rapidly. And so for me, the solution, my favorite theory about that is that life was indeed delivered to Earth, perhaps from somewhere else. So unfortunately, this doesn't answer the question of how life emerged. You know, we haven't created life in the laboratory, and according to Feynman, Nobel Prize winner, you know, what you cannot create, you do not understand. So I would then conclude we do not understand life. Saying that we were delivered to this earth or our microbial ancestors were delivered does not answer the question, it just pushes it back. But it is comforting to me because when I look out at the night sky, I feel a sense of belonging. I feel an affinity with what is beyond. And therefore, for me, this theory makes sense that I have some genetic memory of being more expansive than only living on one planet. So that's it in a nutshell. I guess you'll have to look to the book if you want some more rigorous detail. And the alien stuff, we'll have to leave for another discussion.
Thanks, Adriana. So colleagues, if you want to speak, if you have any questions or any comments, or you can just raise your hand and then I just call on you. Yeah, I think there are some questions I see on the chat box. Okay, before that, Ariel, you can go ahead.
Thank you. Can you hear me well?
Very well, yes.
Okay, thank you very much for this space, for this time. Adriana, congratulations for this book and an amazing career so far. I've got plenty of questions. I will try to be more accurate on them. I'm located here in South America, in Colombia. I'm just started a couple of months ago my study about this space framework, and it's been marvelous. I'm currently studying in the European Institute for Sustainability in Rome. Perhaps you have heard about it. Anyway, I've got a couple of questions about how you, I mean, if these projects that you have mentioned and you have participated in are based, or it has a political or a support in African Union, if you are gathered by this framework, I don't know, maybe discussions inside African Union, or it's more like some countries like South Africa that has taken the leadership on this mission? That would be my first question. I don't know if I'm going to have extra time, or should I ask more? Sorry.
It's fine. You can just ask another question, then she can respond to both.
I'm sorry. All right. Yeah, that would be my first question. And of course, I would say that many of us, I mean, people around the world that are into this space movement, space industry, are motivated because we are a little bit, crazy about, how to develop ideas. Yeah, I don't have your book already. If you could actually send us through this platform, or by mail, the link where we can actually get access to it, it would be really great to read your book. I mean, I'm internationalist. I'm not into the science field. I'm not biologist or genetic. You have such an amazing background, and many of the people that work on this issue are more technical. I'm coming from the social science field, and of course, maybe you have answered this for the previous question from a team. But yes, do you reckon that actually there might be, I mean, currently countries, more than 62% of the investments that we have so far are into the national and security defense field. So do you think that, there might be another actor, maybe an alien, because it seems that we are actually taking all our mistakes of building, humanity, international system, and all this stuff, and perhaps we are taking these same problems into space. Would you recommend, or would you believe that there might be, an I don't know, an alien actor that force us as humanity to work together, to cooperate, and to forget about different conflicts that, unfortunately, if you see, nowadays are getting bigger and bigger? I would say these two questions, sir. Thank you.
Thanks, Ariel. Great. I was in Colombia recently for the first time. Loved it so much. Didn't want to leave. And actually, we are collaborating with your neighbors, Peru, on the Africa to Moon mission. The Peruvian team is putting a small instrument inside one of our instruments. So in that way, we've already collaborated with China and South America through the mission. So let me in some way answer maybe both of your questions in the same way. The external actor, maybe I'll get to, but let me start with we can look at the world and say there are aspects of it that we don't agree with at all, etc. How do we change that? Is it due to some external force, or is this just some internal problem with humanity that we're never going to get beyond? Or so the only thing that we can do as individuals, I think, is to live and engage in projects that stand for what we believe in. And so let me explain the kind of unusual, maybe some details about the Africa to Moon project that really demonstrate, I think, the principles that I believe should characterize the way that we explore space. So firstly, Africa to Moon is an initiative of the Foundation for Space Development Africa, which has 3 directors, Carla, myself, and Kutso, another one of our collaborators, 3 directors. Then we have a team of 33 volunteers. So we're a non-profit, officially a non-profit private organization, founded by Carla. I came on as a director. Kutso and Gashoing came on as a director a few years after me. So the 3 of us, we don't get paid. It's a non-profit. Now we've applied for the Africa to Moon project to go with China to the moon. We needed expertise. So we have 33 volunteer engineers and scientists who all work outside of their regular jobs to participate and get our proposal through to the Chinese. Now, this is like extremely detailed conceptual designs. When we start to build it, next problem, everybody says to Carla, we need money. We're like, well, we don't have any. We don't have money. We don't have any money. The only money we've spent is on pizzas for lunch when we invite the engineers to come and have in-person discussions. Not a cent. So what do we do when we need to manufacture? So Carla had a meeting. I didn't know about it. They said we need to get to manufacturing, obviously, next. We're literally building a telescope. Obviously, we need to manufacture and test. Firstly, I called Carla then the next day and said I had a meeting with another collaborator from South Africa, and they have a precision and composites manufacturing facility, and they want to get involved. So we have another meeting, they volunteer their services. We now have our precision manufacturing and composite 3D printing company on board. Our balls are not complex, it's only 15 kilograms, so it's not impossible to get people to volunteer this kind of thing. Where do we test these? Because we need to test them before we ship them to China. Paying for the shipment is a problem we'll deal with when we get there, but that's literally the costs we're looking at now, because the testing, the South African National Space Agency has volunteered their facilities for the testing. The South African Radio Astronomy Organization has volunteered their personnel, so the engineers that work for us have now been allocated hours out of their regular jobs where they cannot work after work, but during work. So this is the kind of behind the scenes explanation that we haven't put in our press releases that I'm happy to share with you all to explain the nature of this Africa to Moon project. Now, when I work in other projects where people do it partly for remuneration, partly for this, partly for that, I look at the purity of the Africa to Moon project, where everybody involved is volunteering their time, from the manufacturers to the testing facilities to the people actually building and designing this thing. And I think this really embodies the spirit of collaboration and of not putting the, sorry, I shouldn't leave out the launch, right? To get to the moon would cost tens of millions of dollars. I think 50 million was the number we looked at for getting Africa to the moon. Then we see China again in the spirit of collaboration, and we've kind of picked through the agreements and things we've signed with them, looking for some loophole, I don't know, some nefarious like small print at the bottom. No, we don't see it. Like the spirit of collaboration is really the driver for the reaching out of China to say, listen, we've got space on this payload, on this mission going to the moon for payloads from various parts of the world. We've got Turkey also traveling on Chang'e 8, Iran, Pakistan, Peru with us, South Africa. Africa we represent because we partner with currently 5 other African countries. By the time we launch, we want to have organizational partners in all 55, South Africa minus, so all 54 African countries. We really want to have a representative from each of these countries somehow contributing to the mission. So I think China's doing this in a true spirit of collaboration. So our data will be embargoed for the first year, where only China and us will have access to it. After that year, we need to release it to the public. So for that first year, Africa will have access to our Africa to Moon data. China also will partner with us to have access to that data. We can publish together or separately. And then China mandates that 1 year later it be released to the rest of the world. So really this looks to represent what I believe is a way that I can get behind for exploring space, where collaboration really drives the way that these projects happen. So yes, we'd be delighted to, and we will, Carla has such broad and deep networks. She's been working in space with government for more decades, let's say. So we will partner, well, I don't want to say we will, but we look forward to discussions with the African Space Agency and the African Union. But I think the fact that we've got to this point without these government entities has been the agility and the efficiency and the passion has got us to where we are. We've invited SANSA on board the South African National Space Agency because we would like to collaborate. We've invited SAREO on board the South African Radio Astronomy Organization. We've got institutions in Botswana, Kenya, and Ghana so far, and we look forward to inviting many more. So, but as the owners of the project, as the initiators of the project, we are the umbrella under which everybody will conform to our collaborative spirit. And that's the way we're going to go forward, with or without the support of government, who takes much longer to do things. We've got this far, and we welcome anyone to come on board with us who's in the same spirit of collaboration. And I think that's the way we get out of this competition-driven, conflict-driven kind of mindset that we're in now. It's just to live that spirit of collaboration. And we really hope that Africa to Moon not only talks about collaboration, but demonstrates what's possible through collaboration.
Ariel mentioned something about the African Union. Maybe I should just follow up with that with a question. Do you see any role for the African Union or the African Space Agency? I remember when South Africa was launching its the Space Weather Center, late Dr. McKinnell was at one of the meetings of the African Union to kind of promote participation of other African countries to kind of leverage or use the Space Weather Center. So for this project, when you go in Africa to, so the concept is Africa-wide kind of a thing, even though it's initiated by or managed by a private NGO. So do you see any role for, or what kind of role would you expect them to play? The African Union, the African Space Agency?
We expect nothing, but we welcome any contributions. So I think it's up to the partners to decide how they would like to contribute. For sure, we would like to get the message out there. So the educational side, what we imagine in the future is that every child in Africa has heard of the project, maybe as part of a school project, part of a curriculum drive, part of some, rocket kit that could be distributed through Africa that could build such a telescope and try to test it in there's plenty of opportunities, I think, for getting the spirit out there, inspiring young people to get involved in science and technology and whatever aspect of contributing to society they may be interested. Not to downplay the role of the African Union or the African Space Agency. The expertise that sits there, we would welcome, for especially the scientific analysis of the data. But I think for us, the educational aspects are as important as the science and the technology. So for sure, having a network of interested parties able to assist us on that front, getting this message out there, as well as analyzing the data. I think once the data is back, we'll have 1 year where Africa has unique access to it with China. So that'll be a great push to publish as many papers as we can from that data, but also to think about the next steps. Right, once we've gone through all of these hurdles with the Chinese Space Agency, partnering on the next mission is easily on the horizon. And for example, the CNSA has recently announced a call for proposals for the Tianwen-2 mission to Mars. Now things are getting interesting. So we need to encourage African institutions to put forward proposals for an instrument that could do what we do, which is going to Mars, piggybacking on the Chinese mission. Then there's the base, of course, the lunar base. So if we can just spark one idea in one office or laboratory somewhere in Africa where some people come up with an idea of how they can solve challenges that the people living on the moon will face, there's plenty of them, whether it's the resource extraction or any aspect of the life support infrastructure or the industry that will happen there. Africa needs to participate. And certainly the three of us directing the foundation can't do all of it. So I think we just need to encourage increased participation in space exploration, being customers or perhaps product creators for Earth orbit, is fair enough, but we can't sit in Earth orbit waiting for some aliens to intercept.
She's next, I tell her she my girl. Oh, you like that? Like that? You like that? You like that? You like that? You like that? Oh, you like that?
Sorry about that. Okay. So I don't know whether that's a virus or what. I don't. Anyway, yeah, there are two questions. Oh, so are you through? Sorry.
I can hear. I'm good.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. There are two questions relating to sensors. What's happening here?
Aliens are intercepting.
Yeah, it looks like. Let me see. I'm gonna do.
Oh, by the way, sorry, Ariel, I did post the link to Amazon and to Audible in the top of the chat. So I don't know which Amazon is more convenient for you, or if not, Amazon Audible, I think, is available globally. So the audiobook. In fact, I read the audiobook also.
Great thing is this alien came into. I don't see that.
Oh, maybe I'll repost it in case.
I appreciate.
Okay, Alvin, sorry, I know you posted a question earlier on. I'm just trying to get that question. I don't know whether you want to speak. Alvin, you asked a question about with Sansa.
Yeah, how you doing? It's a long time no see.
Yeah, good to see you.
Yeah. Hi, Adriana. Thank you for that overview of the space industry from start to where we are right now, with a little bit of a political lean as well. Also, very well appreciated. Thank you. About the radio telescopes that you guys are putting out there on the back end of the moon. I'm guessing that that China would be responsible for communications from the ground to moon. What role does HuffPost Hook play in that? Or is there going to be a role for HuffPost Hook planned?
Great question. So these have been the subject of some of our more detailed technical discussions, and we do have collaborators from SANSA sitting in on the meetings, and they have offered the participation of HuffPost Hook in the potential ground receiving stations. So that remains to be finalized or learned by us exactly. But since China is owning the lander and the orbital craft or the satellite that will receive the data and then transmit it back to Earth, they will make the final decision on how exactly that deep space communication gets back to Earth. But we have indeed offered up the facilities at HuffPost Hook. So great point, which we are thinking about and working on now.
Thanks. I think this is a fantastic initiative to spur SANSA into a little bit more activity. Just my personal experience, right? And I hope that the guys on the other side of the fence are listening to the work that you guys are doing and seeing how they can contribute. I think one of the questions that were asked on the chat here about getting the message to more local people is something that SANSA does really well with the work that they're doing out of the SKA and the previous Cat 7 work. The communities around there do get lots of support from SANSA, but I think something like this is more than just a couple of comics that they send out every now and again. We need to do a little bit more out of the comms side. So yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And we are engaged with the communication team at SANSA. I think they've got a great network and a lot of activities, education focused and otherwise. Yeah, just a side note, the facility at Hermanus is actually the longest continuously operating magnetic observatory on the planet, because during World War II, various other facilities stopped operations for some period of time. So South Africa has a claim to fame there in terms of observing space weather. And this is going to be a primary part of our research. So we're happy to be collaborating with the SANSA team out of Hermanus, because our primary targets will indeed be the Earth's auroral activities and the sun's emissions and the interaction between these two. So we do have the amazing people working at the National Space Agency. So yes, we can hope to see some movement from leadership in assisting us or on some other project. But I think it's time we moved beyond ground-based activities, beyond Earth orbit, and start getting ambitious and putting technologies and soon people, hopefully in my lifetime, also in the mix. Thanks.
Yeah, we do a lot of work with the Magnetic Observatory in down in the south coast there. So if you need some help with some ionospheric modeling or anything like that, then happy to help. I've asked Itam to put us in touch if that's possible.
Please, yeah, I can just put my email address here. We're a small group. Feel free to send me a mail. That would be great to chat.
Okay, I know
Are
there
you
was
seeing my? Is everyone seeing my messages now? Yeah. Okay.
yes, yeah. There was a question earlier by somebody who's doing his PhD, but I can't find it. So I don't know if the person wants to speak. That'll be fine.
Hi, Adim, it was me.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, I guess I'm kind of younger in the crowd. Maybe I just finished my mechanical engineering degree, and I was very interested in the projects you talk about, Adriana and everyone. And I was just curious how I could participate and contribute and get involved in these projects. Like, I guess you've had experiences with a number of engineers and what are the possible routes perhaps maybe they that led them to get an opportunity to work on space projects. And I was just curious if you had any advice, is the route like master's and PhD, or are there any other routes? Like, any advice would be much appreciated.
Thanks, Taviani. Where are you living at the moment, if I could ask?
I currently just finished my engineering degree in Canada. I'm originally from Kenya.
Oh, okay. Thanks for your question. Great to hear from you. I would say on a practical level, you can go onto our Africa to Moon website and join the mailing list. Obviously, at the moment, we're prioritizing building the telescope with the group of engineers who have contributed to building Meerkat. So people who are really specialized in engineering these kind of antenna, thinking about interference, which was the problem with the Chinese telescope. And obviously all the intricacies of being extremely sensitive as possible in the extremely cold conditions that are on the moon. And for that side, we bring in the space engineers who have familiarity with low Earth orbit. But let's remember, from an engineering perspective, low Earth orbit is easy compared to the south pole of the moon, where temperatures go down to maybe negative 60 degrees Celsius and go up. Now I'm unfamiliar, but I think less than 100. Whereas on the surface of the moon, we're seeing them drop to negative 200 and below, and then again up to the higher temperatures. So we need people who are experts in low Earth orbit, but we also need to look at the previous ways in which Japan, Russia, India, the US to a limited degree, and China have solved trying to survive the lunar night. So this is not like they are experts on this. They are, everyone's figuring it out at this point. So it's a great time to be at the point you are in your engineering degree if you are interested in space. I would say, join our mailing list, and when we put out calls, perhaps for brainstorming for the Mars mission, which I'm super excited about. We want to put a proposal through to China for the Mars mission also. So we would welcome any ideas on that. But otherwise, I would say, I don't know how you feel, but I would say keep studying. So it's a great environment to collaborate from. If you're enrolled in the university as a master's student in the next stage of your life, or maybe you go straight into working for a fantastic project, who knows? But I would say in my experience, being a university student may not get you that salary that you want. Maybe all your friends are earning money already and you're still suffering as a student, but I did that for many years. But the opportunities that come your way and the potential for networking and collaboration and travel through conferences, etc. For me, I love being in the university environment. It just opens so many doors. And, you know, if we put out a call for experts in a specific system, that could even become the topic of your research project, facilitated by whoever you may be working with. So that's a piece of advice which you could think about. I don't like to tell people what to do, but for me, the university environment was a fantastic place to collaborate and hear about exciting things happening around the world and also participate. So please join our mailing list, and perhaps we'll put out a call. And if you have any ideas on instruments for the lunar base or Mars, we'd be happy to hear from you.
So I don't know whether at this point you want to do maybe the reading you're talking about, maybe a bit of the reading. Is this something you'd like to do now? Just an aspect
Do
of
people want to hear that?
Yeah, I think so.
I can do a
Because
quick one.
I find the book very interesting, so I think it would be nice to hear that. I have some favorite parts actually, but let me allow you to do your reading.
Let me do 5 minutes.
Okay.
Or maybe a bit more. Let's see how we go. Okay, so the whole book is not like this, but this is an interesting chapter called A Day in the Life on Mars, where after a lot of theory and science, I get to imagining what it is to live on Mars. So let me read you a small excerpt from there. Maybe that will inspire you to go check out the book. So it's chapter 7, Off-World, A Day in the Life on Mars. I wake up early, the rest of the team still asleep, to prepare for the guests arriving from Earth today. I walk quietly through the shared sleeping area, through an airlock and into a corridor, touching the uneven walls of a faintly lit tunnel as I go, feeling the smooth sealant layer with which we have coated the walls of the subsurface lava tube. By adding urea, yes, from our urine, to experimental regolith composites made from Martian sand, we improve the strength of this epoxy to perform well as an airtight coating, preventing gas leakage in or out of the porous surface of the subterranean cavern walls. Sleeping and doing some of our work underground provides protection from the relentless cosmic and solar radiation. The thin atmosphere doesn't afford much protection on the surface of this home away from home. I pass through another airlock and then climb rather easily in 0.4 G, which is gravity just more than a third of Earth's, up to the surface facility. All is still, besides the faint buzz of the air conditioning systems. I gaze through the large window on the viewing deck at the yet dark night sky. The same stars are visible as from Earth. However, two oddly shaped and less familiar small moons are also visible to the naked eye, Phobos and Deimos. There is a blue dot in the vast night sky too, Earth. Although the new world just outside is so close, at night temperatures can plummet below -90 degrees Celsius, the coldest temperature ever measured on Earth. And going outside without the correct gear would result in hypothermia, unconsciousness, and then organ failure within minutes. At pressures 100 times less than sea level pressure on Earth, exposure will immediately affect the eardrums and cause exposed moisture to evaporate, impacting vision and reducing the ability of the lungs to absorb oxygen, which is only present in minuscule amounts anyway. To prevent rapid death, we can only experience Mars through a protective suit. While on Earth, we coexist with abundant liquid water and plant life that prevails in the ambient conditions and are able to sense the molecular components of the environment as we breathe in the air. We'll never smell Mars, not in the current state of the atmosphere anyway, and not anytime soon, unless this week's meeting go particularly well, that is. We haven't yet celebrated a coffee bean harvest. I add leaves from our Camellia sinensis plants to the hot water in my cup and sip on green tea. The steam mingles with the scent of the freshly printed composite wall panels of the inner viewing deck and the warmth of the ventilation systems, keeping the deadly outside environment at bay. Gradually, a glow appears in the east. The solar arrays glint in the first light. Sunrise has a blue hue because of light's interaction with very fine Martian dust particles. The horizon looks close. Mars is just over half as wide as Earth. The sand is a reddish color because of the iron oxide or rust content, which creates a pinkish sky as the sun begins to rise higher, appearing smaller, being around 50% further away than from Earth. Light winds stir up the fine dust, which falls back down to the ground at an unfamiliar rate in the low pressure and reduced gravity environment. I'm grateful for the tea, all locally sourced, besides the seeds, that is. The surface sand on Mars contains traces of water ice, with larger deposits deeper under the ground. There may even be liquid water maintained by geothermal heating and pressure beneath the surface, particularly further south in the polar region, which remains to be investigated. Our landing site was selected both owing to the estimated availability of near and subsurface ice, as well as the distance from potential liquid water deposits. While all known life, including our humble multi-species community, requires the precious H2O molecule for survival, we also want to prevent contamination by our activity of such potential underground lakes, which may host Martian life. Some of our researchers were part of the team that detected microbial life living off methane and ammonia in lakes in the dark, a kilometer of ice under the ground in Antarctica. So that chapter goes on, but maybe I'll leave it at that for now. You can also get a free test sample on Audible on the link I've given if you want to hear more.
Thanks, Adriana. Just as we round up, there are two things that I'm still trying to figure out in the book. One is that several times in the book, you mentioned that there are many things we don't know. I mean, despite all the discoveries, several times in the book you mentioned we don't know this, we don't know that, we don't. So I'm just wondering, I'm just trying to figure out in my head too. I don't know. I don't know at what point. I'm just trying to start to frame the question basically. So what do we know that helps us to connect with the universe? What do we know that helps us to know where we come from? Because really, there's quite a lot that we don't know, yet at least we know a lot.
Nice question, and that reminds me of an important aspect of the book, which is to emphasize that we are part of the universe. And we might have heard people saying that, but let me give the physics perspective. Perhaps we feel like we know more than we know because the hydrogen atoms in our body come from the Big Bang. So did you know that hydrogen is not produced in significant amounts in space? The hydrogen that we have in the water molecules in our body that make up more than half of our body were originated soon after the Big Bang itself. So 10% of our mass is as old as the universe itself, plus minus a few 100,000 years. So we have almost 14 billion years of history sitting inside our bodies. So you could go spiritual with that, but even if we don't, we can go molecular or atomic on that and say we have a record of the entire universe sitting inside our bodies. Our minds are another story entirely. But when we look at our DNA, we have strings of molecules that contain information that are 4 billion years old. When we compare the DNA of bacteria to humans, we see similarities. We are related. And so we contain also within ourselves a history of the entire history of Earth, of life on Earth. So while we may not understand life because we cannot create it, and while we may not understand the universe because 95% of it is unobservable, the dark energy and matter, so it's just 5% we're left with, and we don't even know everything about that, we can say that we are part of it all. Maybe in our conscious minds, we have not yet figured out the mysteries and the questions that we have to ask, but we are already part of this mystery not in some way, in a fundamental way. So perhaps this curiosity and the sense of belonging that come hand in hand are what drives us to perhaps remember what we know about ourselves and about the universe. So in the book, I mostly keep it from a physics perspective, but every now and then we have to admit that we need to look beyond what science knows because science is so limited, and perhaps go back to thinking about our ancestors on this planet and perhaps beyond, and certainly looking at our molecular history and know that, we, in terms of our matter, has been around a lot longer than us, and perhaps there's some knowledge sitting in there.
Yeah, thanks.
and certainly a
Ariel,
sense of belonging.
yeah. Ariel, I see your hand up.
Yeah, thank you. It's me again. I'm sorry that I'm quite talkative. Yeah, I mean, as I mentioned before, I'm into international relations. I'm a professor in university on this topic. And of course, one of my main objectives or goals is to start creating new concepts and theories about, inside my discipline, and how to understand the current international actors, and how to understand what is beyond Earth. Before, I used to talk or to mention in academic scenarios the concept of interplanetary migrations, and people were like, "Are you crazy? How to deal with that?" And after that, I met some communication people, and they were advising me to change that concept because it's too far from locals and for people. It seems like you're talking about too much. So I'm starting to talk about more and using concepts like outer space, orbit, and trying to be more connected to people, and to make them understand exactly that we are more into it. Do you think also that it's quite difficult to make understand people about that perhaps we will be migrating into another planets, from your current experience? And the other question, which follows this concept, is that I don't know if you have heard about geo-astropreneur. I found it in artificial intelligence on ChatGPT, because I'm trying to connect my background, which is about geopolitics, international politics, and how to deal with it. Perhaps legal framework and all these UN scenario. Would you recommend any other concept to me? Of course, this is very brief, a profile of me, but it would be good to hear your biases and what you reckon about all these concepts.
I'll probably take a bit of a different angle to that question and say I think children find it easy to imagine living beyond Earth, because when I speak to especially young children and say, imagine being on Mars, close your eyes, and they close their eyes and they're there. So I would firstly say humans are naturally curious explorers. And so if adults are finding it difficult to imagine that, then I think they've just lost touch with their inner child, that is able to imagine, and that is curious, and that explores with the mind, if not the body. And I think interplanetary travel is a great thought experiment to get people thinking out the box. And I understand in your sphere what people are saying to you about getting through to people in a different way. Yeah, I get it. But I think it does work in some contexts to say, forget about whether it's possible or not, but imagine. And then Mars is a great thought experiment because there's nothing there yet. So if you try to reimagine society while thinking about people living on Earth, you come into so many immediate hurdles because there is so much that's already established. But when you look at a blank slate like Mars, I think it's a great thought experiment. And I go into detail in this in the book on how to imagine if we could start from scratch. How would we rebuild? What would be the basis? What would be the fundamental principles on which we would rebuild? And when you say that on Earth, people immediately come up with problems and ways that they can't achieve what they're trying to achieve because of this and because of that. But if you give them the opportunity to really, okay, on Mars, you really do have the chance to start from scratch. Let's say you're part of the first 10 people living there. What does your constitution look like? And so I've actually run thought experiments with people like this, like write the constitution of Mars, imagining that you are there. And because I think then naturally in the book anyway, people can disagree, you go to respect for life. Because life is such a fragile resource in such an extreme environment that naturally not only the humans but also the plants and every seed that grows will be celebrated. And of course, every human will be a precious part of the team. But even that first germinating seed would be a critical celebration for everyone there. And maybe that's at the heart of what we've lost touch with here on Earth, simply because life is so abundant. We've forgotten just how mysterious, unknown, and precious this phenomenon is, where we take it for granted. The smallest insect, which we, without thinking, just kill because there's so many of them. On Mars, you might say, wow, where did this guy come from? Anyway, getting off the topic now, but appreciation for life in such a harsh environment would be naturally the focus. And I think if there's anything space exploration can do for Earth is to perhaps emphasize just how unique and mysterious and precious a phenomenon life is. And if we think about living beyond Earth, or if we do live beyond Earth, I think it becomes really obvious. And at the heart of what we've lost touch with here on Earth is respect for each other. Firstly, respect for all of the species that sustain us. Photosynthesis provides pretty much across the board the resources we need: the fossil fuel, the oxygen, the food, the environment, the temperature, the rainfall. There's a network of life on Earth that we really take for granted, and we'd have to rebuild this network when we leave the planet. So thinking about how we would do that in a practical way, but also in a cultural way, I think is a great thought experiment. So go back to your geo-astropreneur fearlessly. Yeah, I think it takes time to get these ideas through to people. I think with me, they kind of expect it, so maybe it's easier for me. It would be a challenge in many other environments, I'm sure. But I think once people are living on the moon, it's going to become a lot easier, because when there are permanently inhabited research stations on the moon, it's not a crazy idea anymore. Eventually people will have seen someone on TV, or maybe even know someone who's been to the moon. And then it's really not a leap to think about interplanetary expansion at all. We're living in that crazy era where this is going to happen, hopefully.
Yeah.
Thanks for the question.
Thank you. I know the discussion has been.
Thank you.
Yeah. I see Anel on the call. I just wanted to put on the hot seat if you want to speak about the policy or legal aspects of space exploration or building communities in the moon. Anel, sorry.
Thank you. Thank you, Adriana. That was really, really very interesting. I come from a space law environment. That is my research field. So I explore, the legal implications of all space activities, but I'm also very interested in the legal implications for off-Earth living. And as you mentioned just now, for example, what would a constitution look like? What should we make provision for in such a constitution? And so that's extremely interesting questions, and some ideas have been offered by people on how such a constitution should look like. I don't know if you know about the space nation called Asgardia. They call themselves a space nation, obviously, in terms of the outer space treaties. No one may occupy space in the sense of appropriating, any space, body in outer space like the moon or Mars. And I think that's one of the sticky points that we are still sitting with, thinking of living on Mars or the moon. It cannot be appropriated because it may not belong to anyone. So if you live there, you cannot claim it as your own. And those are the legal questions that we are grappling with. And as Ariel was also stated, sometimes these things are regarded as a bit of science fiction still. But I think as things are developing, and it's developing very fast, people will see that there are real issues that we need to start thinking about and cannot put on the back burner. And that is one of the challenges, I think, from a legal sense also, is that technology is developing so extremely fast and the law needs to catch up with those technological advancements. But yeah, Etam, I don't know if there's anything else specific you wanted me to mention, but yeah, there's definitely from a legal perspective a lot of work to be done as well. Thinking about human rights protection. How will you be able to enforce human rights if, say, for example, a company like SpaceX has you know what they call, that I don't like the term, a colony on Mars. I don't think it's colonization, and I think we should stay away from that term. But yeah, if they have a settlement on Mars, for example, how will you make sure that a private entity like that you know, enforce the human rights of the inhabitants? So it's very exciting, and there are a lot of wonderful questions and I think wonderful things to explore. And what I think also makes this such an interesting field is the fact that it's so interdisciplinary, and you can draw all these little strings together. And as Ariel also mentioned, yeah, I think there's scope for very interesting things to do. Thank you.
Thanks, Anel.
Thanks, Anel.
Adriana, I know you're more of a scientist, but do you have any thoughts around the policy or legal issues of space exploration, just like Anel has pointed out?
Yeah, sure. That's great to hear from you. Now, actually, my mom's friend handed me a book or a book chapter that you had written. So I felt like maybe we had met, but I think we haven't met yet. I just read your chapter. So great to hear from you.
Wonderful.
I've just Googled you now. I think it must be you. Let me ask. My mom's actually here in China. So let me also say I'm going to have to, it's 9:30 p.m. here, and I have to find if my parents have been lost or where they are now. So I'm going to have to get out of this call soon. But I think what I've tried to address in the book are indeed the aspects, perhaps not going into detail in the legal aspects, but starting from ethics and principles, going into economics and governance models. I have tried to explore these topics, and I think many technologies are available to us, like blockchain, to look at a practical example. You know, with a blockchain system, people could have online identity that is, you know, unique to them through such a decentralized system, which doesn't rely on a government necessarily, or doesn't rely on the place where the person happens to be born. But anywhere in the solar system or beyond that they could register their identity somehow on such a blockchain network. So this is one example of a technology I think that can be managed off and on world through technology rather than a specific entity like a government or a corporation. But as you've said, the mysteries remain in terms of how these things will pan out. But I do believe Mars is far enough that the people there will decide. And so it will largely boil down to the personalities that are there, because even if SpaceX is providing the transport, the degree of control that they will have over people 10 light minutes away is minimal. And therefore, I am hopeful that we really will have the chance to reimagine society from Mars, depending on who gets there. But I think the people who volunteer to be part of the early missions will be crazy enough that we'll have some interesting developments, regardless of what people on Earth may imagine will happen there. But yeah, this has been a lovely discussion. I want to thank Etienne again so much, and ASLI for making these events possible. I see you host regular book events, so I will join the list and hopefully join again in the future. It's been great to meet and chat with you all.
Thanks,
I hope if you do have time to read the book, I hope you enjoy it. And yeah, feel free to get in touch.
Thanks, Adriana. Thanks very much for your time, and thanks everyone. And like you've mentioned, yeah, we do have regular book cafes. We try to make it every 2 months. I think that's bi-monthly. So the next one will be in June with another colleague at the University of Pretoria, Samuel Oyewole, but that will be more of space policy or space law or space security. So we move from science to that. Thanks, everyone. But just one more last question, if you don't mind. I just wanted your thoughts. Do you see a convergence between the scientific view of the universe how it started or how it will end, and the religious or spiritual view. I mean, I'm just very briefly, do you see a convergence at some point?
Something's coming into my mind now, which is very ancient texts that refer to certain things that we only discover recently. For example, ancient Sanskrit texts and Vipassana. So I've done these like 10-day silent retreats where you hear the ancient texts that say the rate at which the vibrations in your body happen, and they give some number which has reference to our number systems today. And then they calculate from quantum physics that this is exactly the frequency with which electrons and atoms vibrate. So crazy convergences like that come through remind us, I think, that there's always some truth in what we may call religion or ancient texts or myths or legends or stories our parents tell us, or books from ancient times. So I think we should, if those resonate with us, then we should think about them critically or not, however we choose. But this even refers back to your question of, how much do we know and how much don't we know, and how has humanity evolved through the ages? Did we know more than we know now? Maybe people lived on Mars before. That's a whole nother story. Let me not get into that. When there was water, maybe anyway. Yeah, let's not go down that wormhole. But I think, we should be glad that we only know that 95% of the universe is unobservable, because we've still got a lot of work to do. And an exciting time to be alive, where we'll be experiencing living beyond Earth for the first time in the next few years. Hopefully, while we're all still here, this happens on the moon, and then as a stepping stone to Mars and beyond.
Thanks a lot. So I would encourage everyone to pick a copy. It's a very good book, well explained. I mean, the book is written in a very layman's language, so it's not all, no calculations, no equations, very easily written and easily understandable. So please try and grab a copy. And then I also encourage that you subscribe to the Africa to Moon Mission newsletter, so that you get regular updates on that also. So with that, I think we can adjourn for today. Thanks a lot, Adriana. Thanks everyone for joining, and hope to see you in the next book cafe. All right, have a good rest of the day.
Great to meet you all. Thanks for the questions.
Thank you. Yeah, bye.
Thank you, Adriana. Thank you very much. Have a good one. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.